I'm Philip Corey Rourke, your host, and along with my three co-hosts, we will explore AI as a disruptive force. AI is rapidly evolving and it's important to stay informed. But what does this disruption mean for us? Join us as we delve into AI's transformative impact on industries and leadership. We will also discuss which familiar products and services might soon become obsolete as a result of AI disruption.
In our upcoming panel discussion, we will explore how AI is transforming leadership in everyday life. Our consulting experts will provide valuable insights on how to leverage AI for effective decision-making and tackle various challenges. We aim to highlight how AI can be embraced as an enabler rather than viewed as a threat. Philip, along with his co-hosts from Visionary Voices, Coaching 2100's Partners Network, will discuss the disruptions caused by AI and examine what trends are emerging in this space.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Lisa.
Philip, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
It's good to see you here. Here we are.
Good to be here.
It's great to be here. Look, we have a really interesting topic today. We're talking about disruption, as always, on Disrupting for Good. And we're also going to speak about how we've personally been disrupted. It's sort of a background for part of the reason for this show and the disruptions that we're starting to see in the marketplace with others. And we're going to be talking to other people and their experiences with disruption. Lisa, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about your disruption and what's motivated you to be part of the show?
Well, I'm passionate about AI and passionate because I have been disrupted so many times. I remember the Corona coaster of like all of a sudden you can't see clients in person anymore. And although I'd been building an online brand for 4 years before that, I was pushed into high gear because it wasn't an option anymore. So I quickly started my podcast, Whole CEO with Lisa G, and just shifting into disruption, just taking the silver lining out of the disruption and finding that even though it feels really stressful at the time, it ended up being for the good. And it just didn't stop there. Obviously, I'd say for everybody that I know, all of you guys out there, the last 5 years have been disruptive. And now it's exciting. It's time to roll with it because I then, moved to Washington State after being in LA forever and had to start over again less than 2 years ago. And I love it. But, it just takes a certain adaptability these days. You got to be able to roll with stuff because change is hard. But in my past, when I didn't embrace change, then you're pushing against what is. So you got to adapt to what is instead of getting stuck in the problem. A lot of times I see with leaders that transitions take longer than they need to. Like something happens, you got to be like, okay, this is how it is now. And that used to be hard for me, but when you have no choice, you have no choice. You have to embrace disruption. And AI is not going to replace people, as we've talked about before. It's just going to be the people that that are adapting AI are going to embrace you. So we want to help leaders adapt quickly like we have had to. And what about you, Philip? I know that disruption is not just for me personally.
Oof, it's true. You said something very, very important. You said, don't get caught up in the problem. Don't, trip in the problem. And we talk about change management as well when we're talking about this. And it's your own personal ability to adapt and change.
Yeah.
And, all of it's tied together. And of course, when anything happens in your life that's disruptive, the word itself doesn't have anything to do with AI, does it? You begin to be self-reflective. And you start to, and if you're a person who thinks a lot or a person who overthinks, as they say sometimes, you can really start to trip yourself up by overthinking, well, why, and going into all the situation, how it's occurred. So I think that there's so many key elements to this. And you talk about and I'm going to tell my disruption story too, but one of them. But you talk about so many important things in your opening there. We have to really unpick this and this is the reason for this show. And it can ruin your life if you let it. And that's what's important for a lot of executives to understand. First off, I've invested in several different businesses over the last 5 years, and have invested most of my life in my own self, my own business, and have a lot of of faith and belief in myself, and it has paid off for the most part. However, I started investing in a jewelry company in 2021, based in Mexico, based on Italian designs, a jewelry company. Fabrizio Sassano is the name of the company. And we had a really interesting start. We started making, started from scratch, started making with the jewelry designer, Fabrizio Sassano, with his name and building upon his style and design. Started making a new e-commerce business to start with. And we had several different opportunities in the business plan, but we thought everything that we would do, no matter what it was in the business plan, would have the foundation of an e-commerce model. So we worked on that in a very dedicated way for 2 years. And when we were going through the first full test year, so we had designed 1 year just to test the e-commerce model and to see how the products played and worked. We had 1,500 facilities with over 1,500 different designs, a big business. We started realizing in that test year that we were working with consultants who were helping us invest in different products. And we would get the product going and advertising it, and then all of a sudden it would stop selling. Like we would make 2-3 sales the way it's supposed to, and then it's supposed to go up, and it would stop. And it happened over and over again. And when we launched, just to go back one step, when we launched the system in the end of November in 22, we made like 10 sales right away, just turning it on.
Right.
Okay. Keep that in your mind. 22, 10 sales immediately. That first January was a pretty good January, considering it right after a holiday. And we have nothing, no SEO, nothing. I think we sold like nearly $1,500, $2,000. Then after that, February, that's when this disruption started. Well, we didn't know it was disruption. And we went till May, June. June, we're kind of feeling crisis mode. Like, what's going on? So we recalibrate, we redouble down on all the things that you're supposed to do. I went through 3 consultants and consulting firms in that year helping us. We find out we get to October, the big movement for the holidays, right?
Right.
Nothing. November, nothing. We spent $20,000 in advertising. We're thinking, what is wrong? How did we go so wrong? Remember the year before last, we just turned it on, and in January we had all these sales. Then we're absolutely destroyed emotionally. You can't even imagine. You can't even think about what we should be doing. We come into January 23. I start hearing and reading 24, and I start studying more of what's going on because I've started my own business now. My non-compete for myself, my company was over. I started learning about this company called Temu. And I was probably 3 or 4 months ahead of the time, piecing it all together and start reading about Temu, who they were, what they were doing, what they're all about. We realized that we were competing against the world's greatest disruption, which is a company called Temu, which a lot of people have heard about. Temu entered the marketplace exactly when we did, with the machine of AI completely connected to e-commerce. In that year, they in 1 year compete with Amazon at the scale that no one can imagine. In 1 year, in 10 months, they had 400 million customers by November. When we had, and they were scraping everyone's websites and studying with AI what to do, how to beat every single player in the market. So someone new and susceptible like us, with lots of products, we were a feast for them. We would see them in the summertime of last year going into the system and scraping us. We didn't know who they were or what they were. We were trying to figure out what it was. Now we know what it was. But at the end of 23, the year I'm talking about, they had generated $35 billion in revenue. They had 400 million customers. We were one of the 30% of e-commerce that will never exist because they annihilated a third of the market. No one's still even really talking about it. It happened so quickly and so fast, but that's a huge disruption. And unfortunately, we've had to completely reconfigure the organization, and we're surviving, believe it or not, but it's not easy. And we're trying to find new markets and new ways to work, and it's working, but it's not what we ever thought it was going to be. Adaptability, oh my gosh, it's been a piece of flesh out of our lives, so to speak.
That's a crazy story about the need for adaptability and what happens when new technology comes in and can do what you're doing, but faster, more efficiently. And I don't know how much of those 35 billion was actually profit, because they are
nothing,
low price, not quality, from what I can see, items. Yeah. And they've approached me. I just never wrote back for years about influencing. I'm like, The
thing about it's amazing is they started their business in 22, July of 22.
Yeah.
And from then onward, what an amazing trajectory for them. So, my story aside, and we've got to look at things a little bit more from a business perspective, they're the most successful startup in the history of the world.
Yes.
I mean, they've conquered the planet basically in a year. So, and we don't measure things like that anymore. But the way we do measure things in business is that they've done a rollout of a scale that no one's ever seen or imagined. And what I think about in this disruption is think about the future. Okay,
Yeah.
What's next for Temu, and how will that platform? It's a platform. It's a runway. It's a connector. How will that connector from production to market work in the future for them, and how will it affect all of us? We talked a little bit before about the medical chairs. And the medical chair is something like, if you're in the medical industry, I'm going to give you the Wall Street Journal view of Temu. If you're not Amazon, you should be scared. You should be afraid. And that word not used lightly by the Wall Street Journal. Look, if you're in the medical industry and you provide services to people that are fairly not sophisticated, I would say, could be delivered by an intelligence in a pinpoint way, you should be afraid, because Temu can now deliver medical chairs. They look like massage chairs to every home in the world. And those chairs could have a medical equipment attachment, dentistry being one that's already proven works without dentists. And it says, even in the dentistry the documentation, without dentists, cleanings and even up to crowns can be produced at home right now without a dentist. So if Temu with its machine can deliver medical chairs, and you can get a dental attachment to clean your teeth, what happens to the dental industry? Just that change. What happens to dental schools, the dental practice, the people who keep dentistry up to date, the people who produce equipment for dentists with hands? What happens to that entire sector?
It's just rapidly changing. So it's really, I think those stories are a wonderful example about the need to be adaptable and embrace change and be like, oh, this is how it is now, and get to that solution focused instead of problem focused.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because when you said something early in your opening, thank you for listening to my story, that leaders may not get there quickly enough.
Yeah.
What does that mean? We don't get there quickly enough.
Well, I think a lot of times we're like, okay, there's a pandemic. Okay, the stock market. Okay, the politics. Okay, the interest rate. There's just been so much coming at us lately. It's not your fault. We've all been in post-traumatic stress disorder at one point or another. So the problem that I see with leaders is simply it would happen to any of us. It's just not just changing fast enough. When you're focusing on the problem, oh no, this is happening, the interest rate, yeah, it's problematic. All of this stuff is problematic. But if you can transition quickly to, okay, what are we going to do about it, instead of, okay, why are we here, or here we are, panic, 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 that's not going to get you to the solutions you need today. It's just to be able to transition faster.
Yeah. Transition faster. You meaning accepting change faster. So we all know that there's a cycle to change, right?
Right.
But what are some of the phases that you go through when you're in change, Lisa? You know the cycle change.
I think what we've all been through is a lot of shock and disruptions, like volatility, uncertainty, and then that is what your clue is disruption. Is you want to run into the storm, not freak out about it. So real disruptors charge forward into disruption and be like, I can do this. Okay, this is happening. Maybe we should change right away instead of waiting to see if it's going to still happen, because it's happening now. So I'd say be that person who has that growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. When you have a growth mindset, you're like, oh, okay, the way we've been doing things isn't going to work right now in today's environment. I need to change. I need to make some quick decisions, because leaders are quick decision makers. So it's charging into the storm. It's adapting quickly, being flexible in your approach, having a growth mindset, and getting somebody to support you along the way, because none of us get through this stuff without really good support.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that support. How do you ask for support when you need support? How do you change your your independent thinking that I can get through these things myself, when it starts to affect you on all levels? Who do you go to when you start to ask for help? What are the types of persons you need to?
Well, you can always get there faster with a master or somebody who's just like one step ahead of you. Doesn't have to be someone who knows all the things. Nobody knows all the things. We think we know all the things, but it's rapidly changing. So the minute you think you know it all, you're wrong. So just because of all the uncertainty and volatility, ambiguity, and change that we are going through right now, acknowledge that this is hard. It's hard for me. It was hard for you with your jewelry company. It was hard for me with, on my birthday, I'd say March 15th, 2020, all of a sudden, everything that I was planning to do, I couldn't do. I want to go skiing. Every ski area in Utah, California, Colorado shut down the day before. So it's like, okay, here we are. So it's hard for me. That was hard for me. And that's why I started my podcast about being unstoppable. I did over 50 interviews those first couple of years with people, just asking them to help other people be unstoppable. What are 3 tips? And I asked all of my high level influencers for that kind of support. So we only need support of somebody who's going to help you pivot quickly, because it was the power of the pivot that I needed. And I jumped into all these classes because I was sitting there alone in my apartment in Santa Monica at the time, feeling like very isolated. And it can be very lonely at times to be an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And you don't, as a leader, you don't have to do it alone. You can just find somebody to listen to you once a week and help you process all this new information and grow through it so you can be better than you were before. That is the silver lining of all this disruption, is really, it's not just being able to like get through it. It's running into it and becoming better because of it.
Lisa, you know this. Some of the people who are on the show may not know this. I spent 25 years in a business called Insala before I was in this business I sold, before I was in this life. My entire life was a life about disruption, because in that we were the internet disruptors. And we were helping companies who were letting people go, like they were doing layoffs. Okay. So the layoffs that we were supporting, helping people transition to new work. We did a fascinating study. One of the projects we worked with the BBC in London, we had all the people at the BBC were fired, basically everybody, and they were rehired, like 30% of the workforce. What they wanted to do was create an environment where people are more entrepreneurial. And they wanted to get people off the payroll and into selling, creating and selling and producing content for BBC and for others around the world, as opposed to everyone being on the payroll just making movies and making shows and so forth. So that was the plan. They did it. That was a huge disruption for entertainment industry, if you can imagine. And one of the things that we did in that study was we found out that, and we worked with some broadcasters who did that work. They did a study of the people who stayed and the people who left. And what was amazing was that the people who stayed were the most disrupted, believe it or not. They were the saddest people. It took them longer to get their life back together again, going in the right direction. The people who left were the happiest people. Some huge percentage of them quickly found new opportunities or started practices and selling back to the BBC. But the change for them emotionally, from being a bureaucrat basically to being an independent filmmaker or working in the industry, was a huge journey for them. So they needed that agile mindset that you're talking about. They needed to be able to embrace change and become adaptable very quickly, and to adjust their goals, their life goals, their trajectory. And that was it's very hard for people to do. But we saw that the people who went through that process were happier. They were more successful. And so there's hope. There's hope. There's another thing about scenarios that's important here, is you should quickly work out the scenarios, because that's basically what they did. Once they realized, they went through the cycle of change, they realized that, okay, well, what are my options? And they realized that life could become better. When they realized it was not the end for their career, they started to work toward setting those goals. And, that was monumental.
Oh, yeah.
Monumental.
that is becoming anti-fragile. So when you're anti-fragile, you charge into the storm and you become better because of it. And what we're seeing right now with AI is it's evolving at an unprecedented rate, requiring leaders to adapt quickly to new technologies. And new tech can be scary as we get older. I mean, I feel it. It's sometimes frustrating. And that's where the support comes in, because there's new market trends. The future of work is uncertain, making adaptability essential for navigating challenges and seizing opportunities and getting that competitive advantage. Because when you adapt to AI driven changes, you'll gain that significant competitive advantage.
For the second half of our thank you, Lisa. It's all excellent conversation, and of course the users, sorry, the participants. If any participant has a question, we'd love to take that from you. But on that same note, I want to switch tones to how can AI, now that it's disrupted us, how can it play a role in helping us? And the first concept I want to mention, a lot of people are very worried about this. They're very concerned about it. And they don't really know where to begin with this. Is how can I personally use AI to make better data-driven decisions? So in the business side, it's a little bit easier to imagine that because you have data that you're working with. And Lisa, do you have any insights on how you could use or how you've used AI to make personal decisions or data-driven decisions?
I'm obsessed with it, to be honest, because as a content creator, for example, it used to take me so long to be like, okay, what am I going to talk about this week? And do all the research. And AI is adapting so quickly that for me, I feel like, how I was talking about how it can be lonely being an entrepreneur. I feel like I have my best friends over here open. If I need to do research really fast, I can use ChatGPT, I can use Gemini, I can use Microsoft Edge and use their GPTs and Claude. So it's really getting them to work with each other, and it makes my life easier, and it can make your life easier when you just use it for one little thing. It's like it doesn't have to be life changing, because that's always really hard to adapt to everything everywhere all at once, which is how it has been for the last 5 years. It's just like, what's one task that I can get more organized? I can make better decisions when I have all these numbers and research and KPIs in front of me at the speed of light. It's just like the things that used to take a month take seconds.
Or weren't possible even for some people. I'm going to use I'm going to combine scenario planning with data-driven decision-making for my viewpoint, for the example here that you're talking about. A lot of people don't realize that they can use AI to create scenarios, and that you can create fairly complicated scenarios. What if then sort of environmental questions, and for your own self personally, you can also put in information like legal documents and agreements. You can combine that information with other types of circumstances like your age, your plans for the future. And AI can do an amazing job of combining all of that information together to give you some programmatic and some pragmatic thoughts. And then you can take those thoughts and continue to build on it. So it's about creating a pyramid of a dialogue, if you will, based on information that you give to the GPT. A lot of people are unaware that this is possible or how it works. So I just, I've spent a lot of time doing that kind of work, and it's fascinating. Also, you can analyze such large amounts of data in real time. And if you did have that sort of data in your personal life, and sometimes people do, they have a lot of different factors, and they also have information from the past. So you can look at your historical data that you may not have ever thought about using. You can take that data, you can copy it. If you have a digital copy, you can turn it into text, or you can make it a CSV file. And that way, that when you put it into the GPT, it reads the information faster. If you get so creative that you want to create a GPT yourself in OpenAI, for example, you can do that very easily, and you can train a GPT to work for you. It's to be an advisor. So you can create a GPT to be your own advisor, to give you information about your life and how to plan and coach yourself, or to receive support from different entities you may ask to get advice, where you should get advice from. All of that is possible, and that's a way that you can use scenarios and data that you have personally to be able to generate that information. And one of our participants, it says, and don't forget Copilot. Absolutely. So, the Copilot, and Lisa was talking about, it's extremely helpful. And Lisa, can you elaborate a little bit more on the Copilot aspect that one of our viewers is mentioning?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. Thank you for that question, because that interacts with LinkedIn. So you can just open Microsoft Edge and LinkedIn in different tab and use Copilot and ask them, these are the 10 things I need to know. What are the top 10 topics? And elaborate on those points, on each point in 3 sentences. And they have access to all of the intelligence of the World Wide Web. In seconds, it can help you create content for LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. So I remember, everything we're talking about, they're all helpful, and it's helping people. But I think unless you are in that moment of disruption, there's another concept we're going to get at. Unless you're in that moment of disruption, everything seems so accessible and ready, and you feel so prepared and you feel so knowledgeable. But Lisa, what happens to us when we find ourselves in disruption? What changes about us that things, seem all of a sudden to dematerialize? What is it? What causes that to happen?
Well, at that point, it happens to all of us. Technology, it's sort of, we can let it get the best of us, and come on, I'm sure that's happened to me. But it's sort of like you can utilize some breathing techniques and you can get through it. Technology is frustrating. It's all new.
But what's happening to us when we get into these disruptions that all of a sudden we lose our minds? Why do we do that? Why do we go blank?
Because we're catastrophizing.
Okay. That's what I was looking for.
I'm sorry if I didn't say that right.
No. That's what I'm looking for. I wanted to know what you think that's why that happens for us. We're catastrophize it?
Yeah. However you say that. It's not a catastrophe. Let me say it in an easier way. So it's just sort of, you breathe, you acknowledge the problem, and then you go for solutions. You're like, oh, okay, this isn't working. Try something else. Oh, this isn't working. Take a few minute break and do some jumping jacks, walk around the block, and come back to it. I mean, for me, I work better in spurts. So like I'm working on something, getting frustrated, walk away, walk around, come back after a little activity, and then you can come back at it with a renewed sense of purpose. So it's hard to stay focused when there is a problem. Sometimes you just have to walk away and come back to it and get support, because we're all dealing with frustrations all of the time. None of this stuff is perfect. Have you ever tried to do a presentation and it just doesn't work?
Yes.
It does happen.
Yeah. I used to say in my old business that we would win business. Sorry, my little dog wants to play, everyone. Apologies. We would win business when we were ready to win business. So when we were frustrated as an organization, we would obviously not be the best company and we wouldn't be the winners. And I felt like when things were flowing and we were in a good place, then we would win business and things would be different. I'm a pretty stubborn person. And I say that stubborn in the fact that I get focused on something and it's hard for me to get unfocused on it, And so that stubbornness shows itself in different ways. And I found that in disruption in particular, that's a death knell, really. If you get focused on, if you become a person who is very focused on going in one direction and the direction changes and you need to change with it, you've got to pay attention to that. And one of our participants says data overload in the brain, then use mindfulness and breathing to quieten the brain. And I couldn't agree more. And even giving yourself a chance to do that sometimes it's just like it's just too much sometimes, honestly.
Yeah, so, we all get Zoom fatigue. For me, I went away for the weekend and I came back with renewed energy and vigor, because it's when I get up in an airplane, there's something about that resets my brain. When I get out in nature, same thing. Go exercise. Everybody has their thing. There's healthier ways to cope and there's unhealthy ways to cope. So hopefully we all have healthier ways to cope with stress, because stress, disruption, uncertainty, volatility, ambiguity is not going anywhere.
Yeah, and just like exactly right. And I just want to say, as we're getting closer to the end now, I just want to say, I've also found as working with the technology, with the AI technology, with teams, and working with groups of people, it's a different experience than what we've had in the past.
Yeah.
And what that means is when you're making decisions and you're being a leader and you're giving assignments, there's a finite amount of information that you can assume that you're working with. You're giving direction, you're talking about a document, a report, an outcome. At the same time, if you're implementing AI into your organization, you're disrupting your team. You're giving them so much resource to use. And I like what our one visitor said, data overload in the brain. Data overload in the brain is a real thing. I experience it myself. There's usefulness in quantity of information, and then there comes a point where too much information becomes too much information to be able to process as a human being. And there's no stopping the GPTs or the AI technologies from offering us more and more, right?
Right.
It's us. We have to be in control of that, or we become overwhelmed.
One step at a time. That's what I would say. Is just
yes.
Take your time. Just adapt one thing.
Great. We're going to leave it there. We're going to leave it. Yes, go on, Lisa. Sorry. Close.
Oh no, I was just going to say, take some time off on the weekends. For me, it's very helpful.
Yes, take some time off. Take some time for yourself. It's very, very good. I'm gonna leave it there for this show. Thank you so much for this, Lisa, for the wisdom that you brought. And sometimes there's so much information, and pilfering through it for our viewers to talk about the most important parts is not easy in itself. But I want to talk a little preview just for 1 minute where we're going in the future, because I hope that all of you who are with us today will come back. We are talking about disruption, but we're going to talk about we're going to building up for something called emergency call, disrupting and an emergency call. And this emergency call is going to be a series of shows focused on organizations who are in change and how they're using AI as they start to adapt and they start to become disrupted and prepare for disruption, or they start to become disruptors. And what's it going to take for them to get there? So this is going to be helpful for individuals who work inside organizations and also for organizational leaders who are trying to determine, what do I do next? Because trust me, most of us are in that seat today. What do I do next? With that, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for today.
Bye.
We invite you to join the conversation every week on Wednesdays at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Follow the link below to participate. A special thanks to leaders of Visionary Voices for their valuable insights and weekly contributions. And to you, our viewers. Are you being disrupted, or are you out there disrupting? We want to hear your stories. Join us next week for more Disrupting for Good. We will continue to explore how people use AI to open doors to incredible opportunities, while doors are closing for others, and why. Follow Coaching 2100 for updates. See you at the upcoming episodes of Disrupting for Good.